Our second reading for this morning comes from the book of Genesis, the 28th chapter. It takes place on the heels of Jacob and his mother's plan, successful plan it seems, to steal the blessing from his older brother Esau. But in light of that and Esau's threat to kill Jacob, Jacob now flees. Listen for what the Spirit may speak to us through these words. Jacob left Beersheba and went towards Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven. And the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood before him and said, I am Yahweh, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your offspring. And your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. And you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and the south. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you. Then Jacob woke from sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. He called the place Bethel, which means literally house of God. But the name of the city was Luz at first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give 1/10 to you. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Jacob is alone and on the run. His con job to swipe the blessing from Esau has backfired, and now his brother seeks to kill him. He must flee for his life. He's running to Haran, the home of his mother. Presumably, her family will take him in. Jacob is in grave danger, but he's not the only thing at risk in this story. The original promise to Abraham and Sarah is in jeopardy as well. When God first spoke to Abraham saying, Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, the country he was told to leave was Haran. But now Jacob has left the land of the promise and is headed for the land that Abraham and Sarah had left. This threat to the promise had been spoken by Abraham a generation earlier. When Abraham was old and near death, he sent one of his servants to Haran to get a wife for Isaac, his son. But he made that servant swear a solemn oath that he would not allow Isaac to accompany him, that he would never allow Isaac to journey to Haran. And so our story speaks of two sorts of threat, of danger. One to Jacob's life and another to God's plans. Jacob may well not be aware of this second danger. To this point, the story has been silent about Jacob's knowledge of the promise to Abraham, or his knowledge of God, for that matter. And so Jacob, alone and on the run, stops to rest for the night. He must have been terribly frightened. Perhaps Esau is in pursuit, and if he knows anything of the promise, he may fear that God is angry at him as well. And in the midst of this threat from his brother and possible divine punishment as well, sleep for Jacob must have been terribly difficult. But harried and worn out by his journey, he takes a stone, uses it as a pillow, and somehow manages to fall asleep. This has to have been the absolute low point of Jacob's life. His scheming to steal the birthright from Jacob has gone horribly awry. He is on the run, his life in danger, and there is no one there for him, no one he can count on. As he journeys from his home toward people and a land he knows nothing about. Even God may be against him. And in this moment of terror and desperation, God appears. Jacob has a dream, one that has been depicted by countless artists. He sees a ladder, probably more accurately, a ramp or stairway going up to heaven. An image likely drawn from ziggurats, the temples of the ancient Near East, with exterior staircases priests would use to ascend more close to the divine. And on this stairway, angels, messengers from God, travel back and forth. And yet, neither the angels nor the staircase play any real role in the story. They seem to be mere markers alerting us to the presence of God, a God who now stands next to Jacob. And indeed, when Jacob recalls the encounter later, he makes no mention of a dream, but says rather that Yahweh is in this place. Now, surely this encounter with God cannot have seemed a good thing to Jacob. Other than Esau, no encounter could have frightened him more. Even if he is unaware of that promise to Abraham, he has to assume that God comes in anger, perhaps to punish him for his deception and thievery. Or perhaps Esau has sworn a curse against him, and God is there to exact vengeance. Either way, it is not good for Jacob. And then God speaks. I am Yahweh, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. Not at all what Jacob expected. There's no talk of punishment, no threat to reboot the promise with Esau or some other family altogether. No, God sticks with this scoundrel who is headed in the wrong direction. God apparently doesn't need someone who is purer or has more faith or better character. Jacob will do just fine for this risky plan of God to bring blessing into the world through messed up folk like Jacob and like me and you. I wonder if there are not some lessons about faith for us in this story. One is that at the very lowest points in our life, God may be encountered. When Jacob, or when we, think that we can make it on our own wits and cunning, God remains elusive. But when we find ourselves in our moments of suffering and failure and pain, an opening appears for God. Perhaps this is why Jesus spoke of the need to deny oneself, or why the Apostle Paul said that the old self must die. Or as Leonard Cohen sang, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. The story also addresses the sort of person who can be an agent for God. In American Christianity, the idea that faith is primarily about belief and knowledge is so prevalent that people commonly speak of not knowing enough to share their faith or to teach or to serve in any significant way. Yet Jacob, who knows little of God and whose life offers little evidence of faith or morality or character of any good sort, turns out to be God's choice. And finally, the story says that any genuine encounter of God means nothing will ever be the same again. Jacob's still Jacob, but he is a new man. His life has a new focus, a new purpose. Jacob is not yet certain how much he can trust this newness, and so the vow he makes to God is conditional. If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go and will give me bread to eat and clothes to wear so that I may come again to my Father's house in peace. If Jacob does not yet know if God is to be trusted, but the story already knows. And so we know that the trajectory of Jacob's life will never be the same again. If this story is true, and I'm not talking about historically true, but true in what it speaks about faith and about God, then we Americans may struggle some to embrace it. If it is true that the place where God gets in is in our brokenness, our pain, our failure, our suffering, our woundedness, then that may be difficult for many of us, because many of us will do almost anything to avoid pain and failure and suffering. We've gotten quite good, actually, at such avoidance. We don't fail. It's always somebody else's fault. And we have a huge arsenal of weapons to keep suffering and pain at bay. We drink or use other drugs. We flip on the TV the moment we come home. We constantly check emails, Facebook, text, social media, our Twitter feeds. We consume a steady stream of distraction that numbs us. I wonder if the busyness of our world isn't yet one more avoidance technique. Many of us complain about how busy and how harried we are, and yet we keep going. I wonder what we fear might happen if we stop. The centering song that we use to ready ourselves for worship contains a quote from God that is found in Psalm 46. "Be still and know that I am God." But if we are really still for long enough, we may well encounter our own pain and loneliness. Our hurts, our fears may bubble to the surface. Grief that we have suppressed may come pouring out. And that crack may grow just large enough for the light to get in. All praise and glory to the God who patiently waits for us to find our way to that place where we can also say, surely God is in this place, and I did not know it. Thanks be to God.